Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to Z Reviews Tech, where I review budget tech that's worth your money. I'm Z, and this is the Redmi 4A, the cheapest Redmi device Xiaomi has launched to date. This phone MSRP is for $70, and phones that cost that price or lower are usually pretty crappy. Xiaomi is revolutionizing this segment with the Redmi 4A. It comes with a very respectable Snapdragon 425 processor, 2 gigs RAM, and the 13 megapixel camera as well. That's almost a Redmi 3 Prime for about $50 less. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be going through every aspect of the smartphone and telling you where they cut corners and whether they cut them too far. So first is build quality, and Xiaomi did cut the metal build from the Redmi 4A here compared to the Redmi 4 Prime. But they replaced the metal with very high quality plastic that actually fooled me into thinking it was metal when I picked this phone up, until I realized that the phone wasn't cold, so it obviously wasn't metal. That being said though, the Redmi 4A still looks like a budget device. Not from the back. From the back, the phone looks pretty good, but from the front, this phone looks like a budget device just because of the bezels around the screen. They're actually pretty big, which is a little bit annoying for me, but at $70, that really isn't a complaint I can bring against this phone. When you turn the phone on though, you do see an additional small black bezel around the screen. So if you add all that bezel up, that's actually quite a bit of bezel for a phone in 2016. Other than the whole bezel problem, the phone is actually pretty durable. It's lighter and thinner than the Redmi 4 Prime as well. So yeah, no complaints here, well, apart from the bezels, but apart from that, no complaints about the build quality. The screen itself is 720p, and it's more than good enough for a $70 phone. It's not like it's a bad looking screen, it's actually okay. It does look a little bit more blue than the Redmi 4 Prime, but nothing too great. The max brightness goes up to 400 nits, which isn't super bright, but is very decent for a cheap smartphone like the Redmi 4A. There's no protective glass on the screen as well, which means that you probably should buy a screen protector for this phone to protect your phone from scratches. The speakers here are pretty much the exact same as the Redmi 4 Prime, which means that loudness and quality are the same. And in terms of loudness, that's a good thing because the Redmi 4 Prime was loud. In terms of quality, not so great a thing because the Redmi 4 Prime speakers weren't great either. To be fair though, it's definitely good enough for normal use, but if you're an audiophile, well, you probably shouldn't be getting this phone. So here's some sample audio for you to listen for yourself.
I have a hernia. I've had it for a while, and I've been ignoring it successfully. But this morning, I made the mistake of sneezing. But as long as I sit still and don't move my head or torso, I'm good, I got this. April.
Yeah?
Get my lunch for me, please.
Okay, like order you something?
No, get it. From there.
Is this some kind of weird power trip?
Please. Thank you. That'll be all.
You're welcome.
I really wasn't sure what to expect from the battery life here. It has the new Snapdragon 425. And would it be as efficient as the Redmi 4 Prime Snapdragon 625? Because if it was, then a 3000 mAh battery theoretically could power this phone for about as long as a Redmi 3. So the result is somewhere in the middle. The Snapdragon 425 is pretty efficient, but not efficient enough to use a 3000 mAh battery as long as a Redmi 3, Redmi 3S, Redmi 3 Prime. It was good enough to give me around 4 to 5 hours of screen on time over a 16-hour day. This was mostly web browsing, Reddit, and some YouTube as well. So those definitely aren't insane results, but they're very good for a $70 smartphone. And I suspect that this phone could potentially have best-in-class battery life for the ultra-budget segment. So while battery life is below what I need for a daily driver, it's gonna be more than enough for most people out there. And there's also Quick Charge 2.0 for you to charge up the phone very fast. We have MIUI 8 as well, with Android 6.0 Marshmallow installed on top, with all the usual functions that MIUI 8 provides. There is no fingerprint sensor on the back, which I kind of do miss, but at least there's double tap to wake. So for normal use, this phone is great. If I'm using Chrome, if I'm using Reddit or texting, this phone is fast and zippy. But then when you're using heavier apps, in the app itself, it's actually pretty fast as well. Where you do see a slowdown is when you're trying to launch it. There is a bigger delay launching the app compared to the Redmi 4 Prime or a Snapdragon 820, 821 device like my Lenovo Z2 Plus. the Mi 5S, or even the Mi Note 2. Multitasking on the Redmi 4A is also pretty tough because you only have 2 GB of RAM, and MIUI 8 takes up a lot of that RAM. So you pretty much have to clear out apps very often on this phone. Thankfully, MIUI 8 does that for you as well. Gaming-wise, this phone can take quite a bit from the App Store. Not intense games, for example, Clash Royale, ran perfectly fine, no complaints there. More intense games, well, the most intense games, for example, the FPS shooter Nova, I was able to play that with almost no slowdown. There was a little bit of slowdown when I dragged my dude trying to look around too fast, but it's nothing big enough to stop you from gaming on this phone. There will definitely be some intense games where you have to put the settings down to low in order to get playable frame rates, but again, that's to be expected from a budget smartphone. It also gets a pretty low Antutu score of around 36,000 as well. Connectivity is pretty standard. 3G and 4G reception is fine. I switch regularly between those two here in Toronto. Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and GPS all work well. Bluetooth range is a little bit shorter than my Redmi 4 Prime, but nothing too big. And there's also a micro SD card slot as well. In bright lighting conditions, pictures taken with the Redmi 4A compared to the Redmi 4 Prime are actually very, very close in terms of quality. There is slightly less detail in the Redmi 4A compared to the Redmi 4 Prime, and colors are a little bit on the yellow side as well for the Redmi 4A, but that is something that is easily fixed. In low light situations, it does take slightly grainier photos compared to the Redmi 4 Prime, and that's not a good thing because the Redmi 4 Prime already didn't take very good low light photos. The front camera suffers from the exact same issues as the back camera as well. It's a 5 megapixel sensor, meaning that you don't get a lot of detail in shots, and in low light it gets even worse. The video camera doesn't have OIS or EIS, which means you have a shaky cam effect, and the video quality is pretty much the same as the Redmi 4 Prime in bright lighting, and a little bit worse in low lighting conditions as well. So basically the camera on the Redmi 4A is slightly worse than the Redmi 4 Prime. So a budget phone is all about compromise. When you move on to the ultra budget segment of the smartphone market, you get even more compromise. And Xiaomi here made all the right compromises in all the right spots and didn't take any of the compromises too far. I like to give what Xiaomi did the phrase optimal compromise. I don't know if it'll catch on or not, but I really feel that those two words really encapsulate what Xiaomi did with the Redmi 4A. They optimally compromised this phone. Sure, it's not gonna blow you away in any one area, but it's not gonna hugely disappoint you in any one area as well, assuming your expectations are in line with the price tag of this phone. And if they are, you are most likely gonna be impressed in more than one area of the smartphone. Thank you so much for watching, and I forgot to tell you, the MSRP of this phone is $70, but outside of China, the price is actually higher. It ranges anywhere between $90 to $110. And at the $110 side, that's not that great a price for the smartphone. Granted, there are a lot of $110 smartphones that are still worse than this, but there are some that could potentially be better. On the $90 side though, this phone is still a great option. And if you can get this for $70, absolute steal of a deal. So again, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Oh, and check out my other Redmi 4 Prime review as well. Link should be here.